A lot of times people decide that they want to do something and then something stops them. What stops you? You'll start looking at excuses and feelings. Now, try to understand that. When you wake up in the morning, whatever feeling you have can precipitate your actions during the day. Let's say you feel good. Now, everything you look at that day becomes more possible. There's a sense of, I can get this done. I feel good. And feeling good in and of itself is a very strong motivator towards positive action. Now, there's another way, that a positive action makes you feel good. And therefore, you look for the positive actions to sustain feeling better. Now, if you're one of those people who has to have a positive action in order to feel good, what happens if you don't have positive action or positive reinforcement or positive feedback? Then generally, then you feel bad. And the idea is we're making something out there responsible for how we feel in here. And there's a danger in that, because then we're saying, I can't count on my own. I can't count on myself. I cannot create my motivation to sustain positive energy. In the absence of creating your own positive energy, it will not exist. If it doesn't exist, then you're going to be helpless and hapless, and you're going to start looking for excuses to justify your own lack of initiative. So don't wait for something out there to acknowledge that you're okay. Make it happen. So I'm not one of those people who believe, wait for the good occasion, or when it comes, let it happen. It's like people get into this very narrow, overly defined path, and bits and pieces of light from, come through the clearing, and they shine on us, and we feel good in that moment. The trouble is, we take another step and we're past the light. Now we're back into the dark. Now it's another day, another hour, another person, another phone call, another occurrence, another interface with someone else during the day, and it's no longer that nice little sunlight hitting us, that enlightenment of that there's a real opportunity to be positive. What happens is that each day we wake up, we almost expect that there's going to be bits and pieces of light hitting us to make us feel good about who we are. Instead of saying, I don't need to be on any path where there's so much uncertainty. Every step I take is going to be illuminated with my own sense of internal love and eternal joy of life, something that preceded me and will be here after me. Now that's a person that no matter where they go, there's light, there's love, there's happiness. And there's always the desire to take a chance, appropriate risks, and see what's going to happen when they do something. Now when they do something, and if something else happens that even stimulates them even more, that's all to the well. But it's not going to be predicated upon them feeling, well, I'm only doing this to feel good. And let's face it, how many things in life do you do just to feel good? And if you don't feel good, you don't do it. Instead, you wake up, you feel good, you're going to sustain good no matter what happens. And we also have to appreciate this. Most of the time, when you don't feel good about something, when something isn't working, it's because there is a lack of love. Not just love of you, but an unconditional sense of acceptance. For instance, if you're at work and you're making an error or you're uncertain of something, and that happens with everyone all the time, so what? If the people themselves who are around you are filled with love, they're going to understand this. And they're going to try to encourage you and to make you feel good, even better, about the situation. You'll see it in every athlete, by the way. You'll see, an athlete who will be helped up off the football field by, their opponent. Because the idea is not to depreciate the other person, because if all you did was compete with people who are under your skills and talent, you'd feel no sense of athletic achievement. You feel best when you're competing with people who are equal or even better than you. And it's true in life. If we go through life feeling that we're never good enough or someone is far too good for us, then we're never going to feel comfortable with who we are and what we are. And therefore, we're always going to be looking for someone else to redefine and reaffirm that we're okay. And therefore, we're not going to feel that there's love around because we don't have the love of self. We're uncertain of self. We're confused about self. And therefore things are going to be negative. Things are not going to work for us because love isn't a part of the equation. Think of all the things that would change if you had love in your heart all the time. If you thought with a heart of love, think of the things you wouldn't do. First, what wouldn't you do when it comes to arguments? You wouldn't have to win. You wouldn't overreact. You wouldn't have to blame the other person for how you feel. Right? Immediately, that wouldn't be necessary. Yes, you could acknowledge that you don't feel good about something, but you try to understand what is the basis of that not feeling good. For instance, you could say to someone, why don't you feel good? What is this really about? Example. Let's say that you're waiting to go to dinner, and it's your anniversary. The man, let's say in this case, is late, and when he gets there, you are angry. And the man says, I'm sorry that you're angry. Could you explain what it is you're feeling other than the anger? And if I can understand something that created this emotion, I can understand what you're feeling. Is it rejection? Is it disappointment? Is it a sense of loss, a betrayal? What is it you're actually feeling that precipitated the emotion that caused this? If all we do is respond to someone's anger in kind, then what we've done is now both people have created an animosity towards each other and start to withdraw their emotions and affection. Now, in the absence of emotions and affection and a positive feeling, we have no beauty, no love, no joy in this relationship. Over what? Over the foolish things. Think how many times we've said and done things that are just foolish, dumb, insensitive, because we didn't stop first and say, hold on, no matter what, there's still love here. And as long as there's love, there's healing, there's understanding, there's compassion, there's sensitivity. Let's never let that out of the picture. There's forgiveness. A person who feels that they need something else in order to feel love is not really feeling love. What they're doing is that they have need. I need you. Instead, they're saying, I love you. There's something about you that I need to constantly have reaffirmed in me in order for me to feel okay. That's not a person who feels it on their own. They truly feel okay. If they felt really okay on their own, then they'd be more unconditional in how they approached you. Do you know there's nothing worse than being in a relationship where you feel absolutely smothered by the other person's need for you constantly to be there, constantly to reaffirm that there's no one else, that you're their only love, their only attention, their only affection, their only emotion. Now, ironically, the very thing that creates the need for that person to do it, their insecurity in not being alone, their very actions are going to create what they fear most. They're going to be so strangling in their relationship to you, you're going to want some freedom from this, and you're going to push them away. In time, their actions have created a response where we're going to push them out of your life. And then sure enough, they're going to be alone because they didn't know that love should be unconditional. I never deal with jealousy or possessiveness because it drains me more than the other person. Well, more than that. Why else? Why wouldn't I be jealous if I were in a relationship, or envious, or insecure? I'm creating whatever I'm feeling. Not the other person's creating it for me. I'm creating it. If I'm feeling love, it's because I created it. If I'm feeling joy, I create it. Happiness, I create it. Acceptance, I create it. Not the other person. And there's something else. All right, the expectation of having other people live up to a need that you have could be an artificial need. And what if a person creates needs that no one could live up to? I mean, let's face it, a lot of times in life we try to make the other person more than a person. We try to make them a hero. We try to make them a mother, a father, a saint, a confessor, a psychologist. All these things, the perfect lover, the perfect mistress. What happens that day when the man can't be the perfect lover or the woman isn't the perfect mistress? Does that mean then that we feel betrayed? Are we let down? Are we disappointed? The false expectations we have of other people are because we're not willing to acknowledge that we're capable of internal processes that can resolve the underlying insecurity that's causing us to seek external stimulation or bonding or commitment to replace that with. And the more we need someone else to take care of who we are, the more insecure we are. Do you follow me on this? So if I'm in a relationship and someone decides to see someone else, how does that affect me? Have I lost anything? I can't lose what I don't own. I can't privatize a person. A person's not a commodity. They're not chattel. I can't mortgage love. I cannot possess the human spirit of another person. And to do so in the most gratuitous manner of trying to give them things, well, look what I gave you, look what we created together, which is generally an indebtedness that those people now must put all their energy on, which becomes the focus of the relationship instead of sharing each other's time and energy. They're sharing a common commitment on their indebtedness. And frequently it takes the form of a family, where the family becomes the object of keeping them together. And let's face it, a lot of people will use a family to keep a relationship together. That's a bad reason to keep a relationship going, as you have a responsibility of a family. I mean, to start a family knowing that you don't have a good relationship, that's foolish. And it's also very selfish, because you're going to have a lot of victims within the children themselves, not just each other. So I can't possess another person. So if another person decides they don't want to be with me, fine, so what? Hey, the worst that happens is I'm no longer committing my time and attention to someone who doesn't feel that they want to share it with me. That doesn't make them wrong, doesn't make them bad. It means they have needs and desires being met by someone else that I'm not able to meet. What am I going to do? Say, no, you cannot. I am all things. I am the only one. There is no one else. I am the most perfect of all lightened beings. Look at anyone else and you'll live forever in Brooklyn. What am I going to say? That would be foolish, right? But that's how we play the game. And then we play the game like we're going to disguise our real needs and make the other person feel guilty for not fulfilling something they never knew we had to begin with. Well, that's a tough game to play, because then both people are always guessing, what's really missing in this relationship? Well, how about starting with the person? What are you doing in this relationship? Why are you here? What do you want from it? And it's only when you can share unconditional love with another person where you do not possess the person that you have a relationship that can grow. You can't grow if one person's smothering the other person. I mean, we live in a world where we're all going to be interrelating with people. And the moment you start turning that off and saying, you can't have male friends, you can't have female friends, you can't relate, where have you been? It's Tuesday night, it's 7 o'clock, I expected my meal, then we don't have a life. We have a routine. And what kind of life is that? And yet that's what most people opted to. Now you wonder why people watch soap operas, why people have to be stimulated by everyone else's adventure and have all these false heroes and cheap novels or movies or even poetry, because we're trying to escape what we didn't create within ourselves and which we're now entrapped in sharing with another person. And we do the same thing with friends or the same things with work. It's the fantasy that becomes more important to us than the reality of change, because reality is a very harsh thing to face. Because to face it, we have to accept it for what it is. And if we can accept it for what it is, then we can alter our perception of it so it doesn't overwhelm us. If we can't accept it for what it is, if it's too harsh, then we try to disguise it. We create a whole new reality, one in our mind. So we live in our mind. And most people can't get out of their mind. They don't have a life. All they have is a mind life. They're like a Woody Allen film, what was it, the Purple Rose of Cairo or something? One of those, or where all it was on the screen. Well, most of the time when I talk with people, I say, what are you doing with your life? They're just going through the motions. Their life is in their mind. I'm asking you, can you get out of your own mind? Can you get out of your own way? If you can't get out of your own way, you don't have a life, you got a mind. And the trouble is, we've never even learned how to use our mind. Using the mind is not worrying about things. That's never achieved anything. Using the mind is not over-concentration, obsessive thoughts, obsessive behavior. It's relaxing. It's the surrender to that which is most natural. And what's most natural is the curiosity, the wonderment, the joy, the grace, the living, the innocence, the honesty, to explore life. Well, how in the world are you going to explore life if you're in your relationships that are completely smothering, where people are basing their relationship on a fear of losing the relationship? Last thing you want if someone's in a relationship and you're insecure is to have someone who has any interest in any life processes that you're not controlling. So you become a control freak, or you allow yourself to be controlled, or both people are controlling, or both people are fearful of showing any interest in life. So you relegate yourself to life being passive. You become a spectator. And that's why these people turn on the television constantly and watch other people exploring life. They watch Explorer, they watch, canoes and going down the Amazon, and rafts going down the Colorado Rapids, and people climbing mountains, because they're not doing it. People who have engaged in life don't think about it. I'm telling you, as a person who lives a full life, and others I know live a full life, the last thing we ever think about is life. I never think about health, relationships, sex, food, anything. If I'm hungry, I eat. If I want sex, I have sex. If I want a relationship, I have it. If I want love, I share it. If I have adventure, I engage it. It's nothing we think about. It's a natural integrated process where there's confidence to share the joy and open and honesty. And people can say, hey, I don't want to be a part of it. Fine, no problem. I'll find someone who will. You don't want to go on a rapid trip? I'll find someone who will. Or I'll go on it myself. Just for the first time, I'm starting to see single people eating out in restaurants. Do you know what kind of a taboo that seemed to have been during the 1970s and 80s? Nobody wanted to go to a restaurant and look like they were alone. Why not? Why not just take a sign and say, I'm alone and very happy with it? Because then we're made to feel unconnected, right? Oh, look at her, nice looking woman, but no one's with her. It's a Wednesday night, alone. Man, what's wrong with you? You got a disease? You got a temperament, a personality problem? What's your gig? And so we don't like to be, how many times not go to a movie by yourself, or not go dancing by yourself, not go to any place by yourself, because we have socialized ourselves to the point where we feel unqualified as people if we're not connected at the waist with someone. We've lost the sense of autonomy of self. We've lost what it means. Can you make any more noise up there? We've lost the sense of what it means to be alive. We're waiting for someone else to say, okay, come on, let's do something, instead of, yeah, I'm going to get up and do it, because it's my life, I'm going to live it, my terms, now. I don't need to figure it out. And the moment you have to start equating, should I, shouldn't I? How am I going to feel? How am I not going to feel? Who would think what? Are they going to accept it? Forget it. You're in Palookaville. You should just get some cement and completely concrete yourself into your couch. Right? Sit there with a little thing like this so you can just turn your life on the channels. Because you don't have a life, if that's what it is. You got to take some risks. You got to be different. That's where life is. Life is in taking the appropriate risks to have a life that's worth living. Otherwise, you're forever trying to have someone reaffirm that you're okay. Just think, if you could live it all over to now, how much time you wouldn't waste this time around because you wouldn't need anyone else to reaffirm that you're okay. All right? How much time have you wasted? You haven't grown, you haven't explored, you haven't done because you didn't have that special other person to do it with. Like, I need this other person. Well, they say I must have this other person. And in some places, that's when you're in your teens and 20s. Down south, most women are married by the age of 18, have children, 2 to 3 kids by the age of 21. Are usually divorced, bored, watching soap operas by 22, 23. And they might get recycled along the way someplace. Same circumstances, same set of situations. Or up here, go up to the Catskills, to the singles weekends and watch everyone walking. Hi, I'm Linda. Are you a doctor? A lawyer? An accountant? A dentist? Do you own or rent? You paying, how much do you pay? Conversations are wacko if you ever, oh really? What do you do for a living? How much do you make? Very, very, oh, how much of that goes for child support? What's left over? What they're saying is, what's left for me, right? Amazing conversation. No one cares, hey, are you a nice person? It's immaterial. They don't believe in nice people to begin with. It's commodities. And we become a part of that, yes. When people are down in something, they overcompensate by trying to prove that they haven't made the wrong decision. That's their ego. The ego is a very, very dangerous commodity in the adult mind. Egos are necessary in children if you have dysfunctional parents, because the ego is the only thing that allows you to have any sense of self that you can retreat into. And what the ego does, then the ego adapts so that you can get reaffirmation from someone that you're okay on some level for something you've done. Otherwise, you're shattered as a child. I mean, if you don't have an ego as a child, you have no sense of childhood if your parents have not given you unconditional love. Because there's never going to be a time when you're enough or okay or lovable just for who you are. So the child's little ego starts the process of saying, okay, if I'm going to get acknowledged for doing something right for daddy or mommy, and then that's all I'll do. I won't do anything that's going to not be right. And so the ego then will take it in and say, here what I did. And, oh, that's good. Oh, you got an 8, that's good. That's the ego. Needing to get A's is ego. It's a disease in our city. We shouldn't have a grading system. The stupidest thing we've ever had in education. It is so sexist, it's so biased, it's so racist, it's so dementing to the American or anyone's consciousness is to have a grading scale. Because what does it show? It proves nothing. First, everyone that I knew who was getting A's was cheating. All right? Everyone. And so what did it prove? And anyone who got C's was considered, you know, moronic, and D's meant you lived in the country or someplace else. And you were socially ostracized if you're on that lower educational scale. You were excluded. So we gave a fast track for those who were willing to use their egos to get ahead. And what did they do with what they got when they got ahead? Look at America today. Boy, isn't it a great place for people who've got smart minds? Yeah, they did very well for themselves at the cost of everyone else suffering. You know, what have we got to show for all of our minds? Nothing. A giant cesspool. Look at Wall Street. Look at the legal community. Look at the medical community. All right? Everywhere you look, the best and the brightest were so selfishly engaged that they took for themselves first without concern for everyone else and just raped and pillared and plundered our entire economy. $3 trillion was stolen, in effect, by the leverage buyout people, the junk bond people, from the heartland of America. And yet the people who are not the egotists, the people who are not self-interested and self-serving, the farmers, the craftspersons, the artists, the teachers, the sociologists, the therapists, the people who really care, who've always been there, these people had no power. They were disempowered. So it's a dangerous thing when you start rating people, but that's what we do. And then we make anyone in our want list, need list, who isn't right up there, we make them everyone else unimportant. Think of all the things in life we passed by that we didn't think were good enough for us, that when we ended up getting it, wasn't good enough for us. Now, what are you uncertain of? Because it's what you're uncertain of that will frequently determine whether or not you are going to go ahead with your life, or whether you're going to keep your life on perpetual postponement. You got to deal with the uncertainties. And you can't deal with the uncertainties by just constantly thinking about them. You've done enough thinking about problems, it doesn't help. Uncertainties in the area, for instance, of fantasies. It's frequently confusing to people. What is the difference between thinking about a fantasy, okay, fine, fantasies are fine, and then trying to see how you can make the fantasy real, or keeping it purely as a fantasy and knowing that it's just a fantasy. But what the danger is when we don't know that it's just a fantasy and the fantasy becomes one of our primary obsessions. It's where we retreat. When the world gets to where we don't want to deal with it, we retreat into the mind. When the person's sitting there at a boring job that they don't like, they start fantasizing about something else. I've done enough surveys on this to find that 80% of a person's active day is engaged in fantasy of escapism. That means 80% of the time is devoted to something else instead of constructively living their life. Now, could you imagine what would happen if you started to turn that fantasy into reality? If you just made an effort at it. And who's to say that your fantasy couldn't be reality? What's standing between fantasy and reality in most cases? What? Action. Put it into action. Yesterday in my gym, I took 3 people who just a week ago committed themselves to wanting to be as fast and as healthy and good as they could to race nationally. These are not elite athletes. These are just normal people. And they've been working on their health and working on their training. And I pushed them to a very hard level. And one of them said, I can't go a 7-minute mile. I've never gone faster than a 9-minute mile. Well, 10 minutes later, when I had the treadmill on, and I didn't tell them what they were doing, I just said, go a little faster, go a little faster. How do you feel? Okay, go a little faster. How do you feel? I was at 7:45 pace per mile, and this person was keeping up with it. Now, what was interesting is when they went 1 mile, I then said, wow, I can't believe it. I acted like I just did it. I said, I'm now going to take you into the 7-minute mile range, and suddenly, I can't do it. It's too hard. Suddenly, I didn't change anything. They'd just done it. But when I put it in their mind they were going to have to do it, boom, they pulled back. Can't do it, can't do it, can't do it. The demon inside says, I can't do it. They just did it. And then I said, and they suddenly had to stop. They grabbed the sides. I said, you already did it. I did? Yeah, you just did it. That's the mind. That's the power the mind has over the body.